Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools, and much more.
Welcome everybody to our ISO2400.org webinar on sustainable procurement in India. My name is Sean McCarthy. I'm a Director of Action Sustainability Community Interest Company. We're the business that delivers ISO2400.org, which is a free-to-access learning platform all around sustainable procurement. Over the years since 2017, since we launched this site, in recent years, the traffic from India to our site has dwarfed every other country. We have a massive interest in the standard and in sustainable procurement from India. So we decided to say, well, okay, let's organise a session then to really understand what's going on in India, what needs to be done, how important is sustainable procurement, and what could we do to improve it. So we've got a fantastic panel of speakers today, which I'll be delighted to introduce in a moment, or to ask them to introduce themselves. So if we can maybe start with Sanjay. Would you like to just introduce yourself? We're promoting this jointly with Sanjay's company. If you'd like to introduce yourself and give us your perspective on sustainable procurement in India.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for organizing this webinar. I am Sanjay Kumar. I represent NEXGEN Procurement Solution. This is one of the few companies in the world which is exclusively focused on sustainable public procurement. And we offer services to the government to different partners like European Union, Switch Asia, World Bank, ADB, mostly in Asia Pacific region as of now. So we are young in the sense we started in August 2023. And we will be completing 2 years. And we are delighted in the sense that during this period, we have been able to offer services to more than 10 countries, to be precise, 11 countries in Asia Pacific, related to different aspect of sustainable public procurement. This is a brief background of the NEXGEN Procurement Solutions. And regarding sustainable public procurement, especially when you consider the traffic from India, I don't know the exact reason why, what is the reason for the traffic, but definitely, the awareness surrounding sustainable public procurement has been gaining ground. Right, people are more and more, they are becoming aware of the issues which they are facing. Even on the government side or in the corporate side, a lot of things are happening. Government amended their procurement regulations way back in 2016-17, and they have been doing continuously. And at the same time, the sectoral legislation issued by different ministries like Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and other ministries they are also revising the documents, rules related to sustainability, which can add and contribute to the development of sustainable public procurement policy in India. And in corporate sector also, if you look at the corporate sector, many things are happening. You will find, if you go browse to the website of different corporates, you will find sustainable public procurement on the web page. Maybe they will have a one-page document on such public procurement policies, but the details are not available in the sense how they are making impact, how they are creating impact, what are the practices they have adopted, which could be replicated by the other corporates or which could be replicated by the governments. Similarly, if you look at the procurement legislation regulation in India, sustainability is like a footnote of a book. It's there, but like a footnote, not many people are aware of how to integrate sustainability and what the legislation actually speaks about, integrating sustainability, right? So, the procurement regulation as a whole is focused on a compliance-based, right? Compliance in terms of the footnote related to the sustainability is not even complied by the most procurement people. Yeah, so a lot of works need to be done both in the public and private sectors, and I'm sure that something will happen in coming years. You can say it's a slow process, but somebody has to take the decision. Leadership has to come in and support the regulation, support the joint platform, sharing of best practices, so on. So I'm sure that something will happen in collaboration with all of us. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay, for that initial perspective, and we'll certainly come back to you with some more questions and dive more deeply into those issues in a moment. Shailly, would you like to introduce yourself and give us your perspective?
Firstly, thanks to ISO 2400.org and NEXGEN for hosting this webinar. I'm Dr. Shailly Kedia, and I'm a senior fellow and associate director at the Energy and Resources Institute, which is a research institute specifically on environment and sustainable development. I lead the policy research team on sustainable development. And to that end, one of the perspectives from a sustainable development on public procurement is goal number 12 of the Sustainable Development Goals, out of which target 12.7 is on sustainable public procurement, and that is one entry point. But in general, in India, even some of the earlier initiatives, including the National Environment Policy of 2006, did encourage looking at purchase preference as a tool for sustainable public procurement, and specifically if they met environmental characteristics. So yes, the policy landscape in India is evolving. Much of my experience really comes from the public procurement space, wherein we have worked with officials, including Mr. Sanjay Kumar, who was formerly with the government, to shape the policy landscape on sustainable procurement. Happy to see that there are encouraging developments even in the private space coming from public sector. And I'll be happy to share some of these perspectives as we go along in the discussions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Shailly, for that introduction. And I'm aware that you've mentioned that you have some reports on the topic as well, and it would be great if we can have those and put them up on the website so people can read them and understand a bit more deeply. So, Kaustubh, can I come to you, because I know your perspective is very much as a supplier, and I guess as I would say, a victim of sustainable procurement coming down the supply chain. So would you like to introduce yourself and give us a little of your perspective?
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Mr. Sanjay Kumar, for inviting me to this webinar on sustainable public procurement. Post a disclaimer, we are not the victims. We are actually have the opportunity from the sustainable public procurement. So actually, there's a lot of business opportunity I could foresee from the building construction or a built environment point of view. I represent the Global Cement and Concrete Association India chapter. So we work with the Indian cement companies in driving decarbonization and innovation within the cement and concrete sector. So sustainable public procurement has a close linkage with the activities which we do, as there was a task force on sustainable public procurement set up by Government of India a few years back. And we were really looking at, with the inputs from Mr. Sanjay Kumarji, is how we can position cement, especially the blended cement or a low carbon cement, under the sustainable public procurement. So we worked on defining what are the sustainability values from the blended cement point of view, how it plays a role in positioning it as a sustainable material of choice, and how it also benefits not only the cement industry but also the overall built environment as well as the other industries in holistic manner, so that it gives the basic glue required for the construction industry, that is cement, but at the same time it takes care of the waste which is generated from the other industries, and truly this how the cement can be positioned as a sustainable building material. So it not only will release some amount of CO2 while manufacturing the cement, which is unavoidable kind of a hard to abate sector, but at the same time it will accept or include the waste like a fly ash or a slag, which is a big challenge for the thermal power plant and a steel industry in utilizing it as a supplementary cementitious material, thereby substituting clinker without compromising the quality of the cement or a concrete. So in fact, cement, I think we felt, is a position as the best sustainable material which we can have because cement is the second most consumed material after water. So if we have that material as the sustainable material, then I think we'll be definitely able to achieve our objective of implementing the procurement in India as well as across the world. So cement can play a major role in it. So as I mentioned, Sean, I think you're absolutely right. Almost 70-75% of the infrastructure which is required in 2050 is yet to be built. So in terms of the cement consumption, as we have seen in the last 20 years in India, it is continuously going up. And the same scenario will continue in India till 2050 or 2070. Whereas in other parts of the world, especially the developed countries, the cement and concrete consumption has kind of a plateaued. So it's not increasing. So our expectation is maybe cement consumption in 2050 maybe 2.5 to 3 times than the current level. But at the same time, as cement is considered, the cement manufacturing is considered as the most polluting industry, hard to abate sector, predominantly because of the large amount of coal which is consumed to do the clinkerization at 1400 degrees Celsius. And at the same time, when you decompose the limestone to manufacture clinker, you release the process CO2 emissions. That's why the cement has you can say, 2 ways it releases CO2. So when I talk about a cement positioning as a sustainable material, this is obviously the question comes is, you are one of the highest CO2 releasing industry, so how you can position as a sustainable material. But at the same time, cement as such, when you use as a binding material in manufacturing the concrete, so there are a lot of benefits the cement can bring with it. One is the clinker. When you use in manufacturing cement, it can be blended very well seamlessly with the waste, which is a fly ash and a slag. The thermal power plant and the steel plant are the other industries, most polluting industries, and they generate a waste which cannot be used by anywhere else. So 20 years back or 15 years back, there used to be a huge issue for the thermal power plant to dispose of the fly ash. So if the footprint of an actual plant, the energy generating unit is 1 time, the fly ash ponds used to be almost 10 times or 15 times. So that was such a big issue, and same for the slag. But in the last 15 years, the fly ash and slag have a good cementitious properties, and they substitute the clinker very well. So in terms of the Portland Pozzolana cement, PPC, and Portland slag cement, so we have 2 standards where we can use the supplementary cementitious material in the manufacturing of the cement and produce the PPC and PSC, and which in fact gives a better performance when you use that kind of a cement in manufacturing concrete, especially in the harsh environment near the seashore or in the acidic nature, in the industrialized nature, where you are going to use the cement and concrete. The blended cement with the fly ash and a slag, it gives a better performance because it gives a denser structure which makes the concrete impermeable. So it gives it increases in fact the durability of the concrete when you use the blended cement in the construction. And another important element is this cement, while manufacturing the clinker, you can also substitute the coal and a pet coke with an alternative fuel, which is especially sourced from the municipal solid waste. So you divert the waste which is going to the landfill, creating a big issue and a methane release. So by diverting that waste to the cement plant as an alternative fuel, you are addressing both issues. You are substituting the coal and resultant CO2 emission, and you are also avoiding the methane release at the landfill and the increase of the landfill dumps. So cement and a concrete kind of a position itself as a center of a circular economy. So that's why as a GCCA we position cement and a concrete as a sustainable material of choice, and which is truly a sustainable material which can very well play a key role or a major role in building the sustainable world for tomorrow.
And is there enough demand for more sustainable products? Do customers have a choice, and are they aware of more sustainable products, and is there the demand that you need in order to deploy more sustainable materials in construction?
So in terms of the demand, when it comes to cement and concrete, there are 2 places where the cement is consumed. One is the trade application, where you basically buy the cement bags by the individual home constructor or a buyer, individual buyers for the cement bags, which is a trade, and another is a non-trade, which is used for the infrastructure projects for the large scale mass housing or housing for all initiatives of the government. So government consumes cement in the non-trade application. So in India, almost 73% of the cement which is used is a blended cement, and PPC is the one which is extensively used. But there is an opportunity to, we can take this 73% to 90-95%. We can really increase, utilize the SCM to the fullest, and we can completely will be able to increase the blended cement or a low carbon cement in the construction as well as infrastructure space. What we need really is how to define a sustainable cement or a green cement or a low carbon cement. So once we have those definitions in place, so I think there'll be enough, you can say the pull effect will create for this low carbon cement. So means we can really able to take it about 90% in India. And may I request Sanjay sir to add his views, because he was instrumental in developing this report from the cement industry.
Yes, Sanjay, would you like to take up the story from there?
Yeah, so it's a developing story between GCCA and my previous work in the with the government and now. So we had a long discussion on this subject, like how this cement could be introduced in the government. We also had a workshop in Bombay to how to create awareness around property, which Kaustubh brilliantly explained about the blended cement. So he basically, GCCA supported a study, good institute in India, and it was peer reviewed by a good institute, in fact prominent institute working in the cement and concrete industries. And the report clearly established that if you use the blended cement, it could be the fly ash, it could be pozolna, it could be blast furnace, then you are able to reduce 1/3 of GHG emission just by making the use of the clinker, amount of clinker which you are able to reduce. So if you blend it by fly ash, you are reducing the clinker, and as a result you are reducing the GHG emissions. So say 10 years to 15 years back, this awareness was not there, and many of the standards for bridges, standards for road construction, standards for other infrastructure, those were developed long back, and those standards have not been revised based on the updated knowledge. So we had a workshop in Mumbai, and we especially related to what is happening and why government, especially in the railway, they are not using the blended cement, why they are using still the Portland cement. And we came to the conclusion that those standards were developed in 2006. At that point of time, the knowledge regarding the blended cement was very low. Many of the property which we know of the blended cement, at that point of time we didn't know at all. So since those standards have not been revised, government still is continuing with the Portland cement. So here is an opportunity, right, to look at all the standards which can create impetus for enhancing the use of these kind of materials. And one of the good example which I get while working in the Kazakhstan, what they have done is they are identified 350 national standards, and how those national standards are impacting the climate change emissions. And now they are trying to amend those standards, national standards, so that it becomes a kind of a tool rather than an impediment in their climate change goals. So in India also, the national level, I believe it needs to be done in the sense we identify the right standards and look at those standards which are kind of creating hurdles or kind of old in integrating sustainability in general or climate change goals in particular, and revise those standards looking at the current knowledge on the subject. So that will create a massive amount of demand for the cement, blended cement. The moment you revise the standards, all the governments start using the same standards, and then application of the blended cement it's a kind of a new normal, right? Everybody is using the blended cement instead of the Portland cement, and it will have a big impact, as you were saying, like 70% of the infrastructures are yet to be built. So look at the, just imagine the kind of investment which is going to flow in the coming decades. And I don't know, because I'm not expert on the cement, but are there any good binding materials which could be used in infrastructure? I'm not sure, right? So cement is going to stay. So we have to find out the ways how to reduce the sustainability impact of the uses of the cement, either during the manufacturing or during the supply chains. So I agree with the Kaustubh in the sense that, and in particular, GCCA ambition to reduce the, the climate change and become net zero by 2050 by making use of the, the waste, making use of the cement, other cementous material and so on. So very happy and very potential and good content, good material. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Sanjay. Shailly, I'm aware that your organisation has produced a number of reports on sustainable procurement. I think obviously not. We talked a lot about cement, but it's not just about cement. But certainly something else that was touched on is the role of standards, and how do we actually make people aware of new materials, new types of solutions that are available. Would you like to just expand a little on some of the study work that you've done and the conclusions that you've drawn?
Yes, I would, of course. I think the entry point of standards is a very important entry point as far as sustainable public procurement or sustainable procurement in general is concerned. When we talk about standards in India, the apex standard making authority in India is the Bureau of Indian Standards, and they do have equivalents of Indian standards that mirror the ISO standards. For instance, when we talk about the sustainability space, we have the Indian standard equivalent by the Bureau of Indian Standards for ISO 14001 for 26,000. These are, of course, the common ISO standards that are used in the sustainability space. We do not yet have a Bureau of Indian Standard or IS Indian Standard equivalent for 2400. And, even for the standards which do have an equivalent of Indian standards, because one of the primary point or perspective which I'm coming from is policy space, and say we go to like the Ministry of Finance or to the Ministry of Commerce, which hosts India's digital public infrastructure called Government E-Marketplace. One of the first questions that is often asked is there an Indian standard equivalent? What we have been saying is it really doesn't matter, even if it's a global standard, and some of the multinational companies, they anyway adhere to that. But however, there is a certain preference for Indian standards, and so even though, and I'm just saying this, given the example of 14,001 and 26,000, there is Indian standard equivalent. However, if we look at the criterias or technical specifications, say even in public procurement portals like the Government E-Marketplace, often these standards are not listed. So, one way could be to list the suppliers that adhere to these standards. Now, that's an easy thing for me to say based on these facts, but the supply side in India is very complex. It is marked by a high degree of informality. We have a lot of micro, small, medium enterprises that are part of the landscape that do not necessarily have a capacity to have an IS or ISO equivalent of 14,001 even, for instance. The government of India did, for example, launch a scheme called Zero Effect, Zero Defect, Z scheme. Now, zero effect means zero effect on the environment, and zero defect is obviously the quality part, which anyway dominates the standards landscape. So, and it's been a while, it's been quite a while since the rollout of that scheme. Now, I would say nearing a decade. And if we look at the latest data of the MSMEs that are registered for Z certification, it's less than 1% of the total MSMEs in the country. So this is also a reality which one has to be sensitive about. because India is still a developing country, the social aspect also continues to be important. The encouraging part is there is a framework in place now, but how to empower the MSMEs? Of course, the government is investing, has a budgetary allocation for the Z scheme so that even MSMEs can have certifications. But if we look at the budgetary utilization, it's relatively less. I mean, many of the MSMEs, for them having a certification may not necessarily be the first point that would come into the mind. Plus, with the COVID shock that we had, recently. So I think it's very important to also keep in mind this reality that the supply chain landscape in India is also marked by a high degree of informality. And since even the launch and the fact is that, yes, for India to be most competitive in its trade, it has to have very, very environmental conscious supply chains, including MSMEs. But the fact remains there is limited capacity. And we do hope that this will catch up. But it's an important aspect also of the standards landscape. Having said that, there is still very not enough awareness about the existing Indian standards also. So, for example, my organization have been part of many sectoral committees that determine the ISO equivalent of IS standards and maybe add or modify parameters accordingly. For instance, green buildings is a very perfect example. Like the materials that are used to construct buildings in India are very different than materials that would be used in the UK or perhaps even would be used in another part of India. So, of course, they have to be very material specific. There is still work going on in that. There isn't standards for each and every material. So, yeah, there are these kind of complex realities also that are in place. But even for those very obvious ones, the usual suspects like 14,001, there is less awareness and there could be so much more.
Thank you. It's an interesting dilemma, isn't it? Because whereas standards are really important, sometimes people would say standards actually stifle innovation because it's very difficult to get new and innovative products through a kind of a standards regime. Am I right in understanding that businesses in India, not dissimilar to businesses in most part of the world, there's a small number of large organisations at the top and a very large number of small businesses? You mentioned engaging with small businesses. Is that the case? And what are the challenges in engaging small businesses in India and what can we do about it?
Definitely, when it comes to, of course, with the larger organizations, it's much more easier. They have their systems in place. They have defined organizational responsibility. They have, the OSHA system, occupational health safety, of course, much of it originating from that, and then them integrating environmental parameters as well. But, this is not the case for an MSME, which may just have 12 people or 40 people even. To have these different departments and, it's briefly like going through even ISO 2400, and the kind of organizational structure it demands is not necessarily like suited for micro, small, medium enterprises. To address that issue, closely linked to that is also sustainability reporting. So the government of India came up with the business responsibility and sustainability reporting, which has in two different formats. One is for the larger corporations and companies which are listed in the stock exchange. And the other one is for the micro, small, medium enterprises, which is a slightly simpler format. And so I think, yes, if we just go with the ISO 14,001 to micro, small, medium enterprises, it may not even be the most practical approach. It may have to be slightly simplified. Or perhaps it could be a lot of micro, small, medium enterprises and a lot of my organization's interventions, especially the team which leads in the energy team, happens for micro, small, medium enterprises at a cluster level. So not at an individual level, but at a more collective level. So that's also another approach. But I think this is something which is still evolving. It's not there yet when it comes to micro, small, and medium enterprises. But yes, it is evolving, and it's perhaps maybe time to look at clusters instead of like that location, that special factor, instead of necessarily looking at individual small units. So maybe look at it as a cluster. So that perhaps is definitely one of the ways. And even when it comes to compliance, etc., and this is an opportunity, again, talking about opportunity, India is definitely, there are huge opportunities, and one of the surges which I can also I feel one of the things is that yes, ESG, the awareness around ESG reporting is increasing, awareness around even like the sustainable procurement and sustainable supply chains is increasing, at least in the larger businesses. And definitely the fact is that digital public infrastructure has evolved at a very fast pace in India, whether it's a government e-marketplace or the central public procurement portal. So I think, it is time to use these to leverage, these better to engage with the small players as well as the big players. And the fact that the business responsibility and sustainability reporting is undergoing revision, it's time to maybe even add the ISO 2400 into that when it comes to supply chain related indicators.
We would support that idea, of course. Really interested in what you say about kind of collective and collaboration, and that's something that we've learned in the UK, particularly in the construction sector, where we started the Supply Chain Sustainability School in 2012, with a specific interest in getting the big businesses together to offer free of charge an education platform to smaller businesses, and also to have that consistency of message as well, so they're not responding slightly differently to other organisations. And we're starting to internationalise that now. We've rolled out in Ireland, Australia, and the United States. So maybe India's the next place we need to come, because it feels like you might need that. Can I ask each of you in turn, we've talked about quite a lot about some of the challenges, I guess, and the issues that we're facing. Very interested to hear your good news stories. Do you have examples of things in India that have gone well in terms of sustainable procurement, and what can we learn from them? Sanjay, if I can maybe put you on the spot and start with you, while the other two have a chance to think about that question.
Yeah, so, but before that, I would like to come to the point raised by Shailly. It was a very important point, especially with respect to the GED, Geo Effect and Geo Defect program of Government of India. So it was, as he rightly said, it was launched way back a decade or so, right? But still a number of SMEs who are subscribed to that program is less than 1%. So this brings an important dichotomy between the sectoral legislation and frameworks and public procurement regulation and framework. So in terms of sectoral regulation, if you see quite advanced, JADE framework is very advanced. They have 5 levels of silver, gold, platinum, and depending on how much do you score, you get that level. So it's very good. Somehow, the procurement framework, we did not utilize that framework which is already available. We did not incorporate those framework in our public procurement decision. As a result, why should any SME should spend on that, their time or their effort in getting those certification on the JADE framework? So, yeah, so we need to think, when we are talking about sustainable public procurement, we need to think of how do we harmonize our sector legislation in our public procurement decision, right? This is one of the aspects where we lack very much. I'll tell you very much, because if you look at the sector legislation, it's quite advanced, even in terms of plastic regulation, in terms of C&D waste regulation. Recently, has been revised. It came out in 2016 and 2025. Again, they have revised. So they are quite advanced. But somehow, the procurement regulation is lacking in adopting those frameworks and implementing, kind of harmonizing the rules into the public procurement frameworks. So this was one aspect. And second aspect was regarding competitiveness. So sustainable public procurement, definitely, I believe that it has two roles. You can understand it in two ways, in the sense one is about buying sustainable solutions which are available in the market. But the more important role, I believe, for the government is to create a demand for innovation in sustainability space. And I believe that this is much more important when we talk about the competitiveness, making your SMEs, making your industry competitive at the global level. Because today, in the global market, demand is not for the conventional product, which consumes a lot of energy, a lot of resources, a lot of water, and so on. So if you want your product to be competitive, you want your domestic industries to be competitive, you have to develop innovative sustainable products and services. And this is the message we are failing to give it to the SMEs. This is the message we are failing to give it to the industries. So a lot of work to be done on the communication part to push this message that why this is important for your competitiveness and for the the country competitiveness. So this was a two aspect I wanted to respond to the Shailly. And coming to the good works, yes, lot of good works are happening. If you look at all the multilateral development funded project, so World Bank since 2016 they have made sustainable public procurement as a part of their procurement framework. And especially in 2023, they said that now all above certain threshold, everybody has to use the multi-point criteria in which sustainability has some part. So in the recent years, whatever the project which are happening in the road sectors, in the hydropower sector, or in the urban development, sanitation, and so on, so they all are incorporating sustainability into account. We are doing very good in terms of implementing energy level which we have, energy star levels. So I think there are 4-5 products and all governments agencies they have been mandated, and it is not only being followed by the government procurement agency at the national level, but also at the state level and municipal level, right? But we need to expand the list. And there are many good works happening in terms of ISCOs, the use of ISCOs for maintaining the pumping station for the water supply or for the sewage treatment, right? ISCOs for the managing your street lights. ISCOs for the managing the energy consumption of some of the old infrastructure which we have. Some of the notable examples are like the President House in India itself. ISCOs have been used to reduce the consumption of President House itself, right? And there's many other government organizations. So lots of works are happening, but these are happening at the isolated level, right? Very isolated level, considering the size of the economy, we are one of the G20 member. We'll be surprised to note that India is the only country which does not have a sustainable procurement policy among all G20 countries. So we have to enhance our scale at whatever level we are doing. Definitely it has to be enhanced at a much larger scale to create impact and be a responsible country, in the sense we have a lot of ambitions, but if we have a lot of ambition, it has to be supported by our actions in terms of how we are taking and how we are addressing sustainability issues of our operation. So lot of work to be done. And I'm sure it's all good, and good level of partnership is needed for creating the kind of momentum that we need to do. 2018 was a good year. I will say that when the Sustainable Procurement Task Force was launched, but somehow we lost the steam. So same kind of momentum we need to create now, right? At least in this year, coming year, so on, by pulling together all the people from different sectors. And one good development recently I noted is that SAP India, probably on the behest of corporate sectors, they are trying to put together some kind of the platform. I don't know how it would shape up, but let's see. I'm very hopeful on that. Yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sanjay. Kaustubh, can I ask you if, from a supplier perspective, which of your clients are doing this well? Do you have examples of clients that are really doing sustainable procurement well, which then gives you the opportunity to supply more sustainable products?
Yes, actually, yes, there's a lot of work which has happened with respect to cement and concrete industry to identify as a material having a lower environmental footprint. There are two, three examples I will cite. One is at a government level, like there's a CCTS, that is Carbon Credit Trading Scheme, which has been announced by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And for the cement sector, they have come up with the targets. So the cement industry, those who are able to achieve the desired level of CO2 intensity, if they achieve more than the limit, they'll be able to generate the carbon credits, and which can be traded with the companies who are not able to achieve the target. So there is a lot of, can say, market mechanism competitiveness has been brought in terms of reducing the carbon intensity of the cement, so that you are position your cement as a low carbon cement. And same has also been done by the green steel. Ministry of Steel has announced the norms for the green steel, which has a lower embodied footprint or lower intensity for a per ton of a finished steel product. Another important is as the Indian cement sector, we recently released a decarbonization roadmap for the Indian cement industry, which is in alignment with Government of India's target to be a net zero CO2 by 2070. And one of the important decarbonization lever is increasing the use of supplementary cementitious materials. And by increasing, that is the most important lever, and which can be done immediately. So the next only what changes is the amendment of the Bureau of Indian Standard. Indian standard is what is required so that you can enhance the use of SCM in the construction, and so which basically will drive the sustainable procurement. And in terms of the large companies, there are examples. Yes, there are companies like Lodha Builders, those who are ready to try the new types of cement, LC3, limestone calcined clay cement, which has a further lower CO2 footprint than the other conventional OPC, as they are ready to test, and they have done a testing of those cement, using that cement in making concrete and in building the, you can say, the new houses, including the, you can say, the top end housing colonies. So they are willing to do that. Same has been done by large construction companies like Larsen and Toubro and then the Mahindra Lifespace. They are trying, or they are kind of started emphasizing on the low embodied material, so that the concrete which has or a cement which has a lower CO2 footprint, they are encouraging it to buy. So there's a pull kind of created from the customer. That so one is the supply side, which we talked about, PPC and PSC, but also on the demand side, there's a lot of pull we could experience in the last maybe a couple of years. So even the builders are willing to use material which has a lower embodied CO2 emissions without compromising the durability of the structure that is given. And I'd like to close one with the opportunity is like we have those 17 SDGs, and there are many targets in under those 17 SDGs. So we have done a study at GCC India, and what we found is almost 80% of the SDG targets are possible only with the cement and concrete. So if you have a kind of use a low carbon cement or a concrete, you basically push for that, or encourage the sustainable, identifying cement as a sustainable material of choice, you are ultimately helping in achieving the SDGs.
Brilliant, thank you. It's interesting your mention of emissions trading, because there's an opportunity for a double win there, isn't there? I mean, if you can do better than the targets, then from a marketing point of view, you're positioning yourself as a highly sustainable product. But then there's the benefit as well of the carbon credits, which can be sold, and then that money can be reinvested in further low carbon solutions. So having that sort of market mechanism is really valuable. Shailly, tell us some good news. What's going well in your world?
Well, I mean, of course, one of the examples which Mr. Sanjay Kumar mentioned on the mandate, which in the public procurement space for procuring energy efficient appliances, that is one good example. But of course, it is just limited at this stage to 4 appliances. And of course, what one can learn essentially from that example is it was possible to make it mandatory because it had a standards and labeling for energy efficient appliances. But of course, that's not changed for the last more than a dozen years. It is limited to 4 appliances under the notified appliance category, whereas like BE itself requires much more appliances to have mandatory labeling. So it covers 38 appliances and 16 are mandatory labeling. So that means they have some kind of star rating on how energy efficient they are, and 22 are under voluntary labeling. So of course, that list of the 4 appliances has not expanded, which includes split ACs, frost-free refrigerators, ceiling fans, and water heaters. It can go to much more. Especially in India, there is a demand for many electrical appliances, and also in the industry space. So definitely, like, that is still a good example. But you know, some of the check boxes, if you were to say, one of the very important ones is that there was a dedicated standards and labeling program to promote it. Now, however, what that also led to is that it was only focusing on energy efficiency. A few years ago, and that time Mr. Sanjay Kumar was part of this particular ecosystem, Teddy, with the Confederation of Indian Industry, carried out a prioritization study, and under which it advocated that ACs or air conditioners should have more environmental criteria apart from energy efficiency. Of course, taking a whole life cycle approach, and when it comes to air conditioner, the fact that India has been very proactive under the Vienna Convention for ozone depleting substances. So at least, for example, the type of refrigerant, etc., also becomes very important. And otherwise, also the if you look at the life cycle assessment cost. So one of the good news, which and good practice, which I can share with you, is that the government e-marketplace launched this as a pilot project to make available more criteria for room air conditioners apart from its energy efficiency criteria. So that's a good example wherein like you take a more holistic approach than just taking one environmental parameter. You take a more holistic approach, a more life cycle based approach. Other good example comes from the sector which is quite under discussion here, which is the construction sector. If we look at the fact that so much of the procurement is also pushed by the public sector enterprises in India, and of course it happens there. So when we look at the Ministry of Urban Affairs, and if we look at the Urban Ministry in India, one of the key central public sector enterprise at the national level is the National Buildings Construction Corporation, or NBCC. And each CPSE in India have their own procurement guidelines. There may not be a national sustainable public procurement or even a public procurement policy in India, which is largely just made a part of the general financial rules. But NBCC has a dedicated manual tool for sustainable public procurement. In fact, it is the only one to have so, and that is why there is so much of momentum in the construction space, including in the cement space. So yes, I think sectorally there are good examples, but like Mr. Sanjay Kumar said, that these are all in isolations. In fact, a very contrary to the standard and labeling program of the BE, there is another labeling which has been in India since the 1992 Rio Summit, which is the eco labels. And in fact, even if eco labels were used and integrated in the public procurement system, much of the products which are procured could be green. However, having said so, I think it is more important to have more system-wide frameworks, like including ISO 24400, because when we talk about even public procurement, there are three types of procurements. We have goods, we have services, and we have works. And the works actually take the lion's share in terms of, at least value and to some extent even volume. And to there, you have to have a more system-wide approach to sustainability rather than just looking at individual products and their certification.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, given the amount of investment that's required in India, and I read the other day that India is set to become the third largest economy in the world in the not too distant future. And yeah, it's all about construction, isn't it? And that's where the big impacts are, and that's where the investment is going in. A final question for each of you, if I can. As I mentioned in the introduction, ISO20400.org, we're a not-for-profit organisation. We're funded by Action and Sustainability Trading Limited in the UK, and our mission is to build the body of knowledge in sustainable procurement. So what can we do to help? We're not a large organisation, but we're quite influential. What more can we do? I think we've set out a lot of the challenges and the issues here and the opportunities. Sanjay, what's your view?
Well, let us look at both the public procurement space and also the corporate procurement space, basically the institutional procurement as a whole in India, right? So in terms of public procurement space, in terms of regulation, we need to be more forthcoming and more bold, clearly identifying that sustainability is one of the objectives of public procurement. Because your procurement policy cannot be in contrast to your national goals, right? You have climate change goals, right? You have sustainable development goals. You have other goals and other ambitions in circular economy on the resource efficiency front. But how can your procurement lesson be lagging behind, in addressing those goals? So we have to align our procurement system so that it could help and could become a lever for attaining those goals. So in the public procurement space. On the private sector, I will say that we hear that a lot of things are happening, especially in the big corporates. But as I said in the beginning, we don't have much more details on that. And I'm sure that, what they're doing, there could be many things which could be applicated in both in the private space and also in the public space. So here it is an opportunity to create some kind of platform where both public procurer and private procurer can come together along with the think tank like TERI, along with the global organization like GCCA and others who can join and let us facilitate the discussion around the subject for what need to be done, because that is, I think, one of the most important thing to know, like what is our objectives, and how we can do it together. So I will say, I will stop by saying that we need to do a lot more and much more focus and work together, because collaboration is going to be the most important, and collaboration of all kinds with the internal and external stakeholders, like platform like your platform like ISO 2400.org, which is providing a lot of resources. So why can't we replicate the success of ISO 2400 org by creating a platform in India which could address local issues, which is focused on implementing sustainable procurement in India, both in private sector and in public sectors. So I think that such platform could be very valuable resources and could create the awareness and at the same time, the capacity building for the procurement professional and other stakeholders who are engaged in these sectors. So that will have a good starting point, I believe.
Thanks very much, Sanjay. Shailly, what are your final thoughts? What do we need to do next?
Yeah, of course, since of course your origins emanate from ISO standard 2400, one of the first things that would come to my mind is, of course, work with relevant stakeholders and come up with an Indian standard equivalent with the Bureau of Indian Standards. That's, of course, the first thing. The second thing, as a researcher, I would say that ISO standards are not publicly accessible. It's 199 Swiss franc. One has to pay to access 2400. So if there is some way to make it a public good, that would be great. I think all these standards, now that they affect the global commons, should be a global public good. Well, of course, that's just but other than that, I would agree with Mr. Sanjay Kumar. I would say that sustainable procurement in India has a lot of potential, and yet it is at this stage more at a socialization stage. There is a much more need for dialogue with various stakeholders, including at the subnational level, including at the state level. The encouraging news is that while at the national level we do not have an act dedicated to sustainable procurement, many states have dedicated legislations on at least public procurement. They have even rules. It's about integrating sustainability aspects in those rules. The states are willing to champion also, sustainable public procurement, green public procurement. We are working with the state of Assam. And one of the things that they have started, and of course they're still facing challenges, is to tag every procurement with environmental criteria, with parameters, at least at a very broad level, even though they have started, whether it's clean air, whether it's like waste management, whether it's water quality. So it's of course at a very, very nascent stage, but the very fact that at the highest level of government, they are willing to champion something like this and willing to try, even though they know very well that they're in a learning phase. There are state governments that have green public procurement strategies that have developed. Some of them do not necessarily have a very hard legislative framework in place, but are also issuing advisory notes, for example, in case of Punjab. So I think there is a lot of scope for optimism, and there is a lot of things happening in pockets, like Mr. Sanjay Kumar pointed. It's time to bring everything together and see, what is the maximum, momentum we can actually together build and sustain it in the form of implementation of green public and sustainable public procurement. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Some really good points there. If I can pick up on the cost of the standard, because it is an issue, a couple of things that we already do to help and we can do to help. On our website, ISO2400.org, there's a very simple self-assessment that you can do. It's not a full evaluation against the standard. We ask 20 questions and the system will then give you an idea of how well aligned you are to the standard. And it also provides guidance and an action plan, what to do to get to the next level. So I always say to people, the standard is expensive. It is 50 odd pages. It's not, the most exciting of reads. You don't necessarily have to buy the standard and start from the beginning and work all the way down to the end in order to do sustainable procurement. If you do want to buy the standard, our website has a really helpful world map on the homepage, and you can click on different countries and find out where the standard's available. Because you don't have to buy it directly from ISO, you can buy it from other national standards bodies. So, for instance, the national standards body in South Africa tends to sell standards a lot cheaper than anybody else. Ireland has ISO 2400 available in 5 or 6 different languages, so does the United States. So, do shop around. Those that are listening, do take a look at our website and take a look at what's available. But yeah, we're advocates of the standard, of course we are. But to get started and for a small business, buying the standard is not necessarily the first step. And we'll certainly take that on board in terms of what we continue to deliver. Because what we want to do is get people started with sustainable procurement and to make it simple and cost-effective for them. So thanks very much to all of our speakers. As we've said, India is a tremendously important country. If we're really going to achieve our climate change goals, our social goals, India is set to be the 3rd largest economy in the world. 70% of its buildings and infrastructure don't exist yet. There's a huge opportunity, probably bigger than any other country in the world, to use procurement leverage for the greater good. And I really look forward to working with our friends in India going forward and to achieve those objectives. So thanks very much to our speakers and thanks to those people that are listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on Sense and Sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.